The House will come to order. Prayer by the chaplain.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for inviting me to be with you today. I chose a prayer for common ground today, and I don't imagine that's anything that you ever need to work at, right? So I'm going to offer it as a prayer. If that's not your tradition and you want to hear it in another way, just kind of take it in your heart, hear these words. If you want to bow your head and pray, if that's your tradition, feel free to do that. So, prayer for common ground. Today, may I be open to others' ideas and beliefs, respectful of our differences, not threatened by them. May I grow in understanding of my own motives, knowing that people often act out of their own fears. May I be a force for replacing fear with insight, helping us all to be patient and kind as we talk. Strength, real strength, can always find compromise. Working together, may we find a common ground. Enable us to move forward with a shared purpose. May we see what is truly important and unites us, focusing on that to banish roadblocks of ego and fear. Today, may I be open to others' ideas and beliefs. Amen. May it be so.
The chaplain for today is Chaplain Jenny Eagleman, Director of Spiritual Care at the Minneapolis Healthcare Center and Augustana Care Services, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing and recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Members, at this time I'd like to welcome our newest member of the Minnesota House. We swore in our 134th member yesterday. Please join me in welcoming Representative Ann New from District 32B to the Minnesota House of Representatives. The clerk will take the roll.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Well, get with the program, girl. So, several of the committees, taxes, historical economics, have had a practice of doing the minority vote.
How's that?
I saw it happen. Peter had a bill with me. Yeah, you will see.
As in the one that's amplified.
And I think that does go up to 5 million. Yeah, that one. Yep. Yeah. Well, it's going to be international. Where is it at the end of the day? Depends on how big a tax bill is. Keep in mind that years ago when we had a surplus,
The clerk will close the roll. Quorum is present. The clerk will read the journal of the preceding day.
Journal of the House, 90th Session 2017, 18th day, St. Paul, Minnesota, Monday, February 20th, 2017.
If there is no objection, further reading of the journal will be dispensed with, and the journal will be approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Hearing no objection, the journal is approved as corrected by the chief clerk. The member from Douglas, Representative Franson, for what purpose do you rise?
Point of personal privilege.
State your point of personal privilege.
As I am sure you all know, February is Black History Month. There are many African American leaders throughout history who have done amazing things for not only their community, but for our country as a whole. I would like to take a moment to reflect on one well-known abolitionist and the famous conductor on the Underground Railroad, Harriet Tubman. Tubman was born into slavery in 1820 in Dorchester County, Maryland. She escaped from slavery in 1849 and began successfully helping hundreds of other slaves escape to safe houses in the North. Tubman also served her country by joining the Union Army during the Civil War. She served as a cook, nurse, and an armed spy. She also became the first woman to lead an expedition during wartime when she guided the Combahee River Raid, liberating more than 700 slaves in South Carolina. After the war, Senator William H. Seward sold a piece of land to Tubman outside the Auburn, New York, where she spent a majority of her life tending to those who took up residence on her property. Tubman passed away from pneumonia in 1913, between the age of 90 and 91. Tubman has been named one of the most famous civilians in American history prior to the Civil War. Only Betsy Ross and Paul Revere rank higher in popularity. She is an inspiration not only for women around the world, but for all Americans who believe that we are created equal.
The member from St. Louis, Representative Olson, for what purpose do you rise?
Mr. Speaker, point of personal privilege.
State your point of personal privilege.
Mr. Speaker, members, I too rise in recognition of Black History Month. Members, I rise to remember Elias Clayton, Elmer Jackson, and Isaac McGee. An event has happened upon which is difficult to speak and impossible to remain silent. These are the words at the top of the Clayton Jackson McGee Memorial on the corner of First Street and 2nd Avenue East in Duluth. On the evening of June 15, 1920, 3 black men wrongly accused of raping a white woman were abducted from the Duluth City Jail. A mob numbering between 5,000 and 10,000 people savagely beat, tortured, and hung these 3 men in the middle of Duluth's downtown. The grim spectacle of the mob was posed with a picture with the men who were lynched, was captured by a photographer, and was circulated as a postcard. Until recently, this event has been largely forgotten. Although little is known of these 3 men, we do know that Elias Clayton, Elmer Jackson, and Isaac McGee were taken unjustly and in the most horrific way. These 3 were young men, hard workers with the traveling circus, and with families who loved them. The statues at the memorial capture these 3 men with their eyes fixed on the horizon, their heads held high, and standing strong as they face the corner of the past. In the words of the artist who created these sculptures, our monument relates to the murders of Elmer Jackson, Elias Clayton, and Isaac McGee, to all murderers of the other, the American Indians, Kurds, Armenians, Tutsis, Catholics, Muslims, Jews, Christians, Gypsies, Hindus, and the people who live across the street. Duluth is a part of the world. This particular evil was not in the mob ignoring the law. Many awful things are unlawful, including murder. The evil began as usual as a judgment. And that is why I rise to remember Elias Clayton, Elmer Jackson, and Isaac McGee. The next time you are in Duluth, after you've seen the lift bridge, dip your toes in Lake Superior, and enjoyed a craft beer, make sure to stop by the corner of First Street and 2nd Avenue East to remember this part of our city's story, the often overlooked, forgotten, and so deeply important part of our past. We must know our history in order to understand our present and conceive of a brighter future.
Reports of standing committees and divisions. A copy of this order of business has been placed on each member's desk. If there are no objections, the reports will be adopted. Hearing no objection, the reports are adopted. Second reading of House files.
Second reading House File 399.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 455.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 673.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 686.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 761.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 923.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 1107.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 1118.
Second reading.
And second reading House File 1134.
Second reading. Introduction of bills. The following House files have been offered for introduction today. The Chief Clerk will report the House files and give them their first reading.
Introduction of first reading of House Files 1512 through 1601.
First reading, House Files 1512 through 1601. Report from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration.
Pepin from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration, pursuant to Rules 1.21 and 3.33, designates the following bills to be placed on the calendar for the day for Thursday, February 23rd, 2017, and establishes a pre-filing requirement for amendments offered to the following bills. House File numbers 3, 400, and 434.
Motions and resolutions. There are copies of the non-controversial motions at the House desk and online. If there is no objection, we'll take action on these motions first. Hearing no objection, the motions prevail. There is a motion at the desk. The clerk will report the motion.
Christensen moves that House File number 1345 be recalled from the Veterans Affairs Division and be re-referred to the Committee on Government Operations and Elections Policy.
Recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Christensen, to introduce your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House File number 1345 has to do with the cap for cities and other local government units, including American Legions, the cap that they can spend on trophies, awards, T-shirts, that sort of thing. I've spoken to both chairs, and the Veterans Committee doesn't think they need to hear it.
Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails. Announcements. The member from Mille Lacs, Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, you will find at your desks today a copy of the Code of Conduct that has been adopted by this chamber some years ago and now is in play that we have adopted our House rules. So please pay attention to it and maybe place it in your desks for a constant reminder that we have a very respectful chamber in which we do business, and we want to honor this code that has for so long been a tradition in this chamber. I would also call your attention to our new rules manual. The rule for the Committee of Ethics is 6.10. I happen to be the chair this year of the Ethics Committee, or this biennium, assisted by Mary Murphy and Paul Torkelson and Representative Slocum, and alternates Representative O'Neill and Representative Dean R. Members, the procedure, if you need to file a complaint because there's a violation by a member of our code, then you need to follow the directions set down in Rule 6.10. I also want to remind staff that you are subject to this code, but we do not accept complaints about your behavior. I believe those go to your representative caucuses and their HR directors. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further announcements. I recognize the member from Meeker, Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Tomorrow, February 23rd, is the annual History Matters Day at the Capitol. History fans from across the state, from local historical organizations to the Minnesota Historical Society to many others, will be here to tell us about the great things that are happening in history work across the state of Minnesota, much of it using legacy money. Please stop by the Capitol Rotunda from 9:30 to 11:30 to view the displays and meet with people from the history community in Minnesota.
Further announcements. I recognize the member from Carlton, Representative Sundin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. The Minnesota Chippewa Tribe Dinner has been moved to start at 5:45 tonight, so the members can attend prior to the session. The social hour starts at 5 p.m. at the Doubletree in St. Paul. Thank you.
Further announcements. I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Murphy E.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and a point of parliamentary inquiry under announcements. Representative Erickson brought to our attention the Code of Conduct, and I'd like to ask her a question if she would yield.
She will yield. Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Erickson, for reminding us of the Code of Conduct that has been in place for such a long time. I appreciate that. I was reading it because it was on my desk, and I had a question about the statement that talks about promoting the health of our democracy. And the last part of it, it talks about public participation in government processes. Could you expound on what that means from your perspective, please?
Recognize the member from Mille Lacs, Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the body, and specifically Representative Murphy, to your question. We live in a republic. We are a representative democracy, and what we do as members is, of course, abide by the great principles that our founding fathers brought to us, which is always openness, public understanding of the actions that government takes, which includes ourselves as well as the bureaucracy, and public participation in our hearings in the governmental processes that we provide for in this great legislature. So I think, Representative Murphy, that would be my explanation of what occurs.
Recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Murphy E.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And if she would yield for just one more question, please.
She will yield. Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Erickson, from your perspective, does that mean upholding the state and U.S. Constitution?
Recognize the member from Mille Lacs, Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes.
Representative Murphy E.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I appreciate the indulgence under announcements. I think it's important that we take this to heart. And as we look at this document on our desks and we're reminded that a part of our obligation is to uphold both the state and the U.S. Constitution, at the same time we are marching through this legislature, at least two pieces of legislation that would limit people's ability to peacefully protest. It is the people's right to bring their grievances to the government. That is how they participate lawfully in this government. It is how they form and build our future. And so I would remind members that if we are to uphold our obligation, our sworn oath, and the meaning of the state and U.S. Constitution, it is then in contradiction that we would allow further action on legislation that would limit the right of people to peacefully protest. And if indeed we want to limit that right, then we should answer their grievance by building a future that's inclusive for everyone. Thank you.
Any further announcements? Recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 3:30 p.m. Thursday, February 23rd, 2017.
Representative Pepin moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 3:30 p.m. Thursday, February 23rd, 2017. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails. The member from Hennepin, Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I move a recess to the call of the chair to meet in a joint convention with the Senate for the purpose of electing regents to the University of Minnesota at approximately 6:45 p.m.
Representative Pepin moves a recess to the call of the chair until approximately 6:45 p.m., at which time we'll meet in joint convention with the Senate for the purpose of electing regents to the University of Minnesota. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails, and the House stands in recess.